All right, everyone. Thank you for being very patient with today. I'd like to go ahead and have you guys take your seats so we can go ahead and get started for today's presentation. So this will be the beginning of what we hope will be a set or system of character development presentation. Zach, do me a favor and close that door right there. Zach, close it. Thank you very much. All right, I need for everyone to sit in this 3 rows in the middle. Everyone that's going to participate, please sit in the middle. Yeah, you can sit up front. That involves you too, Chloe and Alex and Amy, if I have to call you guys by name. But I need everybody to sit up here. Now, the reason why is because one of the things that you cannot teach character unless you test yourselves and to make yourselves a little bit uncomfortable, to challenge you so that you can figure out why you think the way you do or why you're made up the way you do. And so I want to make you a little bit uncomfortable, but I promise you that it's not going to hurt. And there's a reason why I'm asking you to do this. So what we're going to do then is we're going to talk about why character is important. And we're going to talk about how to develop what we're calling a win-win paradigm. In other words, decisions that you make in life at strategic times can make a huge difference in your life. It can be the difference between whether you succeed or whether you fail on a continuous basis. And so this is why you have to be challenged as we're doing this. So to begin, what I would like to do is we're going to count off. I'm going to count you guys, and then I'm going to divide you by groups. And there's a reason for that. Yes, you won't be able to sit with your best friend like you were thinking. You're going to be sitting next to somebody else. Again, got to challenge you to make you feel uncomfortable so that you can figure out why it is that you feel the way you do and why it is that you think the way you do. So I appreciate your participation. So whatever I assign you, just go there. Trust me, there's a reason for it, and I really appreciate it. I know it gets a little uncomfortable, and you may not want to do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide you into 3 groups. I'm going to start counting the people up here. And then I'm going to assign you an area, and then you're going to go there with that group. And there's a reason for that. Now, because we have a lot of people watching us on the broadcast, I would like for those that are on the chat to consider themselves as the 4th group. Okay? So there'll be 3 groups here, and there'll be a 4th group up there. And then we're going to go through a little exercise that's going to help you sort of challenge you to think. All right, so I'm going to start off with Samantha. I'm going to count her as 1. Savannah is 2. Now remember your numbers. Abby is 3. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Elise is 3. I'll count you guys all as 1. Okay, all 3 of you as 1. Evelyn and Ron. Yes. Dale is 2. Heidi's 3. Anna's 1, Scott is 2, Greg is 3. Remember your numbers. Jeff is 1, Jenny is 2, Alex is 3, Chloe's 1, Amy's 2, and Chris is 3, and Rhonda is 1. Okay, now what I want for you guys to do is all the 1s sit over here. All the 3s stay where you are, and all the 2s sit over here. So all the 1s, the 3s, and the 2s, if you remember your number. Now you don't want to sit as close to each other as possible because in a minute you're going to have a discussion. All right? So sit as close to each other as possible so you can hear yourselves, so you can communicate with one another. You're going to have to communicate with each other. So 1s, 3s, 2s, and then the people that are watching us on the broadcast are 4. Carolyn, you're a 1, so you need to come over here. And that's fine over there. That's the group. Again, you're going to want to communicate with each other, so you're going to want to have a discussion. So for the first row, I might have like maybe 4 people in the second row, and then 4 people up front, or 5, and so on. So that way some of you can turn back and actually have a discussion with each other. Now remember, we're sort of talking about your character and how you think and why you think the way you do. And to do that, sometimes you have to be challenged. And so what I want to do with these trainings is to make them as interactive as possible, to cause you to think about why you react the way you do and why you think the way you do on a what we call a local scale, but also what scientists call a global scale. In other words, how do you see the world around you? Why do you perceive the way that you do? And how does it affect you? Those are the things you need to know so that you can help, you can make a difference. And when something happens, see, the test of character isn't always day to day. The test of character is when something bad happens. And how do you handle it? And you can train yourself to react. Now, the Army has figured out something amazing, right? The Army takes people, the military takes people out of every background, and they teach them behavior and reaction, knowing that when something tragic is going to happen, they're just going to react automatically. It's become systematic, and that's how they do it. They figured out something very important. Well, unfortunately, we don't have that all the time, and praise Yahweh, we don't have bad stuff happen to us all the time. But when something bad does happen, we have to sort of figure out, how are we going to react to it? Are we going to have a breakdown? Are we going to crash? Are we going to lose everything? Are we going to give in to immorality? Are we going to react with anger? Are we going to react with aggression, violence, all those things? So that's why it's good for us to discuss and to have this training so that we can become better people, and not to say that anybody here is bad, because you're not, but to test you a little bit, to see, take you to the limits of how you think. And you do that by asking you to think about stuff and ask you questions that at first might seem silly, and then we can talk about it. All right, so you guys ready? Okay, so your group then is the group you're going to be talking to. So for our first exercise, here's our first clip. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you a scenario, and then I want you to talk about it amongst yourselves. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to talk about and reason out the scenario. Now, I want you to do 2 things. Number 1, you're not allowed to ask me any questions. You're going to work with the information I give you. Now, if you want to come up with your own perception or idea, however you want to do it, that's fine. But I'm not going to give you any more information than what I'm going to give you. Number 2, there is no right or wrong answer. All right? And number 3, remember what your first initial answer was. Because if it changes over time or through the discussion, we kind of want to know that. You guys ready? All right, so look at the picture. Why don't we minimize the lights up here, Shaloma, on the stage. Yeah, look at the picture. And what you see there is you see a truck pulling a trailer. Right? You guys see that? And you're driving behind that truck. That's you. That's the view you have. Now, up ahead, you see some vehicles to your left, or my left. And then you see that there's a stop sign or a stop light that's red. Also, you notice that the truck has lights, but the trailer doesn't have brake lights. And you are driving and you hit the trailer. Now, the question that I have for you, and think about your initial answer, and then I want you to talk about it amongst your groups, and we'll give you 5 minutes. The question that I have is, whose fault is it? Whose fault? Who's at fault? Whose fault is it for you hitting the trailer? So think about what your initial thought is. And then think about, now what I want you to do is I want to give you 5 minutes. And those of you at home, you can type it in your chat if you feel, whatever you feel. So, oh, it is? Okay, so go, if you guys are on your phones, maybe you can log off so people at home can turn off your Wi-Fi so people at home can get on. But for right now, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Start your discussions now. All right. So I gave you 5 minutes to talk about whose fault it was that you hit this trailer. So now what I would like is for you guys to have a representative from each group and for you to tell me what the consensus was of the group. So we'll start over here. Somebody, whoever, raise your hand and tell me what the consensus is. What was the majority view of whose fault it was? I see 2 hands, Carolyn and Jeff. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if he shouldn't be there because he has trailer lights, or not, doesn't have trailer lights, or if a deer runs across who shouldn't be there, you should be prepared for any situation.
Okay.
There's traffic lights, there's stripes on the road, there's intersections.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Where's Robert at? Can you give him the microphone, please, so that way people can hear? I'm sorry, I'm going to have you two recap, but you had a good.
Yo,
Good
is this on?
start there.
All right.
All right, go ahead and start from the top. So this is the consensus of
Correct? Are we
what you
all on
think the
same
group
page?
is. Go ahead.
Rules of the road call for being a defensive driver.
Mm-hmm.
That the fact the trailer doesn't have lights is that person's fault, and if an officer were there, you might ticket him for it, but as the defensive driver, you are responsible whether you hit that or a deer who comes across the road that shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
There's stripes on the roads, there's a big intersection, there's traffic lights, there's other vehicles, there's plenty of action and things in place that a driver should be aware of all of it.
Okay.
So why they messed up and hit the trailer, who knows, but it's their fault.
Okay, so whose fault is it?
The driver behind the trailer.
So you are the fault. It's your
Oh,
fault.
Us, yeah, okay, we're
Okay.
behind him.
All right, is there anybody in that group, you don't have to, I'm not going to ask you to speak, but is there anybody in that group that feels differently?
I feel it's equal party.
Okay, so, all right, so she feels it's equal party, they're both at fault. All right, anyone, Evelyn?
I think that there could be contributing factors such
Yeah.
as if it was dark.
Mm-hmm.
if-
Well, this
if-
is what
if-
you see is what you get.
Oh, okay, or if
Yeah.
the light just suddenly turned green and he stopped real abruptly,
Mhm.
okay? I just think there could be factors.
But the question is,
like
whose
that.
fault is it? So whose fault is it?
Okay, conclusion, I would say it's my fault, but I still leave. Probably the driver behind.
Okay, what's that?
Probably the driver behind, but you would hope that he would get a ticket
Okay,
anyways for not having the lights.
all right, great. Anyone else feels different than the consensus? All right, let's go to this group right here. First, I want the consensus speaker, and then I want to hear the diverse. So Elise, go ahead.
We think that it's our fault if we hit the trailer.
Okay, it's your fault. All right, anyone in that group feel different?
There was one person that felt differently.
And what was that view?
That was that person's fault.
That person's
The
fault.
truck's fault, yeah.
Okay. so
And
it's-
then also in this state, in Illinois, it's a partial fault state, so
Mm-hmm.
insurance will put them partially liable,
Okay, all right.
so.
So the consensus is, it's my fault,
Mm-hmm.
but one person felt it was their fault.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. Everybody good there? All right, let's go to this group. I need a consensus speaker over there. I need a consensus speaker. Somebody can raise their hand and speak what the consensus was. And in other words, what was the consensus of the discussion?
Our consensus was that it was our fault,
Okay, your fault.
and we had one person whose initial idea was that it was the truck's fault, but
Okay.
he changed his mind.
All right. So initially it was their fault, but then they changed to your fault.
Yes, we all believe it's our fault.
Okay. All right, now, is there anybody in that group that had a different point of view, more than one person that had a different point of view before the discussion? In other words, you felt one way, and then after the discussion, you agreed with a consensus. Is there anybody that had that? All right, Sophie, so you had a different opinion? Okay, anyone else? Okay. All right, yes, sir. No, that's all right.
The truck.
All right, what about people at home? Is there anybody get the message? I'll give you the scenario in a minute. Let's see if anybody at home had any kind of different idea. Shaloma, was there anybody? Okay, the driver being who? You or the person who hit the other guy? All right, so basically the question was for Brother Dwayne. They told you. Okay, so whose fault do you think it is, Dwayne?
I think it is the driver of the car behind's fault.
Okay, so that would be you. It's your fault that you,
I hit the trailer at a stoplight, just like the scenario that you
yeah,
have the brake lights on the trailer.
it's your fault. Okay, now, did anybody think one thing initially when I first read off the scenario? You just immediately thought one thing, and then later on you felt something in the discussion, you felt something different. No? Yeah, I know you did. Anyone else? Okay, so you guys can admit then that you felt one way, and then afterwards you felt the consensus, right? Now, one thing that's pretty interesting, and I think it's unique probably to this group because you guys tend to be more what I would say you come more from a religious background or maybe have that understanding. In some of the other trainings that I've done, and I've done them in the secular world with police and sheriffs and those kinds of things, one of the things a lot of them think, a lot of people that are not necessarily, shall we say, churched, I guess, they feel like it's the driver's fault of the truck, of the trailer, the one that's pulling the trailer. That's how they feel. There's like an overwhelming drive to blame them. So what science tells us is that, now it isn't a negative view, so don't think of it as a negative view. The reason why we ask questions like that is because what they do is that they sort of bring out a personality or characteristic of how we are and can be. And it's not negative. No characteristic is negative, including the negative ones, because they all have their place in your character, in your person. So, but there are some that are more, shall we say, geared towards you having victory or having like a win-win attitude and scenario with regards to your job, regards to how your relationships, how you associate, how you govern your life and what we call the global view, which the global view would be, it's your assembly, society, community, your job, what's your view like and how do you react to how you see things. Now, a lot of you, I know, are on Facebook, and I'm sure that you read some things on Facebook that just upset you to no end and you disagree with. That's just how it is, right? And so, but that goes along how you feel. How you feel is important. Your character is incredibly important. And having a consistent, mature character throughout your life and how you view yourself and having a good view of yourself and having that mature view of yourself is incredibly important. So in a minute, we're gonna go through a story where we're gonna talk about some of the elements that this story is gonna share about a character and personality. Now, one of the things that they say, one of the things they tell us is that if you're the person that blames them, blame the driver of that truck, in other words, it's not my fault, it's their fault, you tend to be more of the personality of what they call a dictatorship. In other words, when you're talking about leadership, your leadership style, it would be more a dictatorship. In other words, things have to be my way a lot of the times, and if they're not, then I'm not happy. Now, I'm not saying that you guys are necessarily like that if you think that way. Only you know that, right? Only you have that, you can say, yeah, I'm kind of like that. That's sort of what I fall under. I like things my way, and if they're not my way, I'm not very comfortable. Now, what they say is that if you blame both, in other words, you say, yeah, it's both their blame, we're both to blame, or if you say it's neither one's fault, then you fall under what they call a democratic, which in democratic and also in French is kind of laissez-faire, which means you're okay with it. You're sort of, you're easy going. You're not a micromanager as somebody that would be blaming the person, be more of a micromanager. Again, not negative, so don't think of it in terms of negative. Think of it in terms of just your personality, your characteristic. And if you're one to say, you know, I think it's my fault, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or it's bad. It just makes you sort of a person that you sort of, what they say is that you sort of think about the scenario, you get to have more of a responsible sort of feeling, and your perception of what we call the global view is more open to put yourself in it and say, how are things affecting me? How are things around me affecting me? How am I affecting my global view? How are people affected by me? And how are they affecting me? So in other words, there's this sort of paradigm where you're connected to other people and you're willing to have sort of an open mind. Again, it doesn't mean it's not good or bad. I'm not trying to tell you that, hey, one is better than the other. I'm just trying to give you the scenarios of what they think. Because essentially, sometimes you need to be a micromanager. And sometimes you need to have a dictatorship, leadership. Because if you don't, then things won't get done. Other times you need to be democratic. You need to have that openness to allow people to, you give people something and then you let them work through it. And you allow them to grow and to work through it. And at their time, you don't force it. And in other times, you need to have that point of view where you realize that what you do does affect other people. Your presence affects people. They, in your life, affects you. So it's all those things are good. So I don't want you to think that I'm saying that if you have one or the other, you're negative. What I'm saying is good to have a balance of all those things and to have them in certain situations where you need to have them. Because otherwise, if you end up with one or the other all the time, you're going to have problems in your relationships. You're going to be the guy that is not very, shall we say, motivated. You ever met somebody who's not motivated to do anything, right? It's very difficult to have a relationship with people like that, man or woman, because they're just not motivated to do anything. Well, it'll get done, or nah, I'm just not in the mood to do it. And it basically, nothing ever gets done. And so it's good to have that balance, to have all those things. All right, now let's move on to a couple of things here. So character traits are all the aspects of a person's behavior and attitudes that make up that person's personality. Everyone has a character traits, both good and bad. We have them. So there isn't like, oh man, I have to have good all the time. It's not going to happen. Oh man, I can't have any bad ones, or I'm just no good. That's not true either. We're always going to have characteristics that some people are going to like. There's some things you're going to like about me, and there's some things you're not going to like about me. You might be like, oh man, he's just a really nice guy, but you just can't trust him. He says one thing and he never does it. Or if he does it, it's random, right? So what I'm saying is not to condemn anyone for any character, is just to recognize you have to internally recognize yourself and to question yourself and to challenge yourself to really look deep and say, man, I have this thing, and the majority of it is not good for me, or it's not helping me with relationships. Sometimes we have bad relationships and we feel like it's always their fault. But the reality is maybe it isn't. Maybe it's our fault for those bad relationships. Maybe I make a promise all the time and I don't keep it. And then I find excuses not to do it. Those are some of the things that you have to, and it's a lot easier for us to point it at people. It's a lot easier for me to tell you what's wrong with Elise than it is for me to tell you what's wrong with me. But this training is really about wanting you, to encourage you to really look at yourselves and to say, okay, I don't want to worry about what's wrong with Sammy or Zach or Alex. I want to worry about what's wrong with me. I want to look internally into my heart, my mind, my soul, and I want to see why I feel the way that I do. And if I have more bad than good, then I want to work on the good. And I want to recognize what is those good character traits that I can develop within me. I can tell you from personal experience 2 things. Number 1, I've been involved in what would people call life-threatening situations, a number of them. And people that you would think are strong and can handle anything, what you find is when what they say, the mud hits the hay, right? I know, well, I'm not actually going to say what they normally say, trust me. Although I am very much aware of how they say it. Trying to clean it up for the clean ears. I know that you guys know what I'm saying. Now, that's the true test of a man or a woman, is how do they react to the mud being poured out on their life. And I've experienced both ends. I've experienced with men that I felt were super strong, confident, mature. And when the hay got hit with the mud, the brown mud, okay? Smelly, nasty brown mud. I can tell you that I sat there back wondering, I thought you were strong. I thought you were brave. I thought you were, but here you're breaking down. You can't make a decision. You're not reacting. I'll give you a quick example. When I was a correctional officer, there was an inmate that lit himself on fire. He did. And he lit his mattress on fire, and he sat there. And so one of the things you don't consider is that when a mattress is on fire, it gives off a lot of smoke. And so it's very difficult to see. But they called out the emergency call. I reacted. I was one of the first responders. But there were already 3 guys there before me. One was a lieutenant and one's a sergeant, and another officer. When we showed up, we looked through the window, and of course it was hard to see because there was a lot of smoke, and we could see that the guy was on fire. I mean, his shirt, his pants were basically lighting up. But those guys were freezing. We were yelling, open the door, and they could not open the door because of the amount of energy that they had going on. They couldn't get the key out, they couldn't put it in the hole, and they couldn't open it. And so immediately then, I said to one of them, to the sergeant, give me the keys and step out of the way. And I looked at the lieutenant and said, you go get a fire extinguisher now. So as they did that, then I opened up the door, and of course the guy just sitting there on fire, he's not crying, he's not doing anything. I mean, this guy was obviously, as you can tell, not mentally right. But he's on fire. And so we run in, and I grab him by the arm, and he's on fire, and I throw him out of the cell because the bed was on fire. And of course, the smoke was just horrendous. You couldn't really see in there. It was just super hot. And I throw him out, and I throw him on the ground, and the lieutenant comes over shaking, with the fire extinguisher shaking. And we grabbed the fire extinguisher, and the other guy that was there grabbed it, and we put this in the fire. We put the fire out of this guy. Now, what it did is it showed me something, and that is that some people can do great. They function great on a normal to normal life. But when it comes to what we would say a stressful situation, they freeze. They don't know how to react, right? Now, I don't know why I was able to react. I really don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. I just did. And it wasn't the first time. There's been other times when I went in, people didn't know what to do, and I started yelling and say, you, do this. You, tell the inmates to go back in their cells. You, go lock the door. You, go call 911. You, do this. You, do that. Now, more than likely, it might be because of the way that I was raised, but I don't know. But I can tell you that some people don't react what you would say correctly. They break down. And so that's why it's important for us to look at these kinds of things and to say, how would I react if I came upon an accident and the person was on fire? What would I do? Would I freeze or would I go to action? You don't really know until it happens, and that's just the honest truth. You may think, oh man, I don't know I don't think I could do anything. I'm just not strong. But I've seen super women, young girls that look like Chloe, and by that I don't mean offensive, but I mean, tiny, and you wouldn't think they have a strength, And I've seen them have superhuman strength in a moment when it's needed the most. You wouldn't think so, but they are super strong, and they go in and they do what they're supposed to do, and then later on you talk to them and they don't even know how they did it. So that's important to know. So having good character is important. There's an important aspect of having good character. This is what we're talking about, having a winning paradigm, how to develop it, how to establish it, how to practice it, how to think it, all that stuff, right? And it takes time, and it's good for us to develop it. But good character attracts the trust and respect of other people, allows you to influence others, changes your perspective about failure. In other words, I failed. How many times do you hear from a kid that says, I didn't do it right, I'm not going to do it anymore, right? And you're like, come on now, don't give up, go out and do it again. The most successful people in the world, by the way, have all failed. Some people, there's some billionaires out there that had to file bankruptcy 11 times before they became billionaires. There's millionaires out there that have lost everything. They ended up destitute, homeless, but then they became millionaires. You know, Colonel Sanders from KFC, that guy couldn't sell air to somebody that needed air, right? Very poor, divorced, everything. He's like in his 50s or 60s and decides to cook chicken one day, and then he gave some to his neighbor, and his neighbor liked it. And then he thinks, hey, I think maybe I'll start serving it. And within a short period of time, he becomes an instant millionaire from chicken, right? So what I'm telling you is that there is an attitude that makes you successful, and successful people have lost a lot and often. But you wouldn't know it because they don't act like losers. They act like winners even if they've lost. And that's something for us to remember. It sustains you through difficult times or opposition. You're going to have opposition. You're going to have challenges. People are going to come. You're going to go through emotional trauma, and you're just going to, go through all kinds of difficulties, real and perceived, but you're going to be okay through them. You're going to go through them okay. Improve self-esteem, self-respect, and confidence. It creates a foundation for happy, healthy relationships. Having good character helps you to stay committed to your values and goals. Sometimes it's so easy for people today to just give up on their goals, right? Or they do so many immoral things because it's the easiest thing to do, or because they're being pressured by other people to do it. Well, that's not my moral value. I wasn't brought up that way, but everybody's doing it, and I don't want to seem weird or odd. I've heard people say, people think I'm good or they think I'm nice, and I don't want that. I'm like, what? Like, why wouldn't you want them to think you're good? Like, that makes you distinct. That makes you different. That's what's good about you and your character. You've got to stand up when everybody's saying yes. You're the one that's got to say no. Because one thing I know from experience is that if one person says no, that person is speaking for everyone else that's not strong enough to say no. But when one person says, no, I'm not doing that, you know that I'm going to admit a little bit of myself. Might surprise you to know that I do drink alcohol from time to time. Now, I've never been drunk ever in my life because I made a rule. First of all, I didn't start drinking until I was probably in my 30s. Because it wasn't that I couldn't drink before, because I could drink when I was in high school. I could smoke marijuana when I was in high school. I could do all those things. But I never did it because other people would tell me that I should do it, and I was not going to be told what to do. If I was going to do something, it was going to be because I wanted to do it, not because 10 or 20 people were doing it. So when I would hang out with my friends and they would be smoking marijuana, not that I hung out with them all the time, but the times that I did, and they're like, come on, Hector, I'd be like, nope. Why not? Because I'm not a follower. I'm not going to do what you want me to do just because you want me to do it. If I ever do it, it'll be my decision. So when I started drinking alcohol, I made a decision, and that was that I was never going to be drunk ever in my life. And so I would go out with my friends, especially when I was in the military. We would go out, go to a bar, and of course they would all get drunk. And they would always designate me as the driver because they knew, well, you know, we can't tell him what to do. He's going to do what he wants to do. But it's kept me safe. Later on, as time went by, I lost friends that I knew to crashing because they were drinking too much. And they got killed in car accidents. But I never had to worry about that because, number one, I never went anywhere with a drunk. And number two, I never got drunk, period, no matter what. I would only have a certain amount, and then I was done. And I would never have any more than that. Not because I couldn't, because it was free and it was available, but because I wasn't going to let anybody tell me what to do. I was going to be in charge of my destiny to some degree, right? At least in the drinking field. So I can tell you that that was a big deal. And one of the things that I found out is people respected that, and they would tell me. You know, the next morning, after a drunken, they would be all hurting and throwing up, and they're like, man, I respect that. I respect that you don't do that. I wish I could do that. When they could, they just chose not to because they gave in to the crowd. It also improves your chances of success in work and other endeavors. It improves it. You have more of a win-win situation when you give in to your developing good characters. All right, let's go through a couple of things. I'm going to go very fast. If you want a list, I'll give you the list, but I want to make these presentations, I don't want to make them too long or too difficult. I want to make them interesting, relevant, and short. I like that. All right, so here's 2020 win characteristics. We're going to go through them fairly quickly. The first one is, oops, it's not working. The first one is integrity. And again, we can write down what these are. Integrity is a big deal. Integrity is what, you know, the Bible says you shall know them by their fruits. Their fruits are, by the way, all these things that we're talking about. The fruits is how you know people. That's how you know whether they can be trusted or not. Like, you can have a group of friends and you'll know, okay, I'll ask him to do this, I'll ask her to do that. No, I won't ask her to do that because I know she won't do it. I will ask this person to do that. I will ask this person to do that. In other words, you know their fruit. They've proven to themselves to not to be trustworthy in what you want them to do. And that's something for us to consider. What is your characteristic? What's your fruit? People know. Okay, people know what it is. You're not fooling anyone. You can only fool somebody when you first meet them. After a while, they get to know you, and then they know your character, and your character is always going to come out. You can't hide it. It's there. Honesty is a big one. We all have problems with that. I know we do, but it's something that we have to work towards, being honest. Being loyal to each other, to friends. How many of us have friends? We're friends to their face, but we're back gossiping about them, you know, somewhere else. One thing I learned is when somebody comes and gossips about somebody else, they're gossiping about me to somebody. Okay, that's going to happen. So if somebody comes and gossips to you, then what you need to be doing to help them develop loyalty is to say, hey, listen, aren't they your friends? Aren't they people that you talk to, go eat with, hang out with at school, live with, whatever it may be? Aren't they your brother or sister, you know? Why don't you go back and talk to them? And don't think, if you get involved in that, guess what? They're doing it to you because that's their character. Now, I've had people that come to the assembly and say, oh, this is a great assembly, and I really love it. And I'm thinking to myself, wait till they get mad or they don't like something. They're the ones that are going to go bashing. Sure enough, it doesn't take long. They go out and they start bashing the assembly, how terrible it is and how there's no good in here. And that's because you are who you are. And if you help each other out by telling that person, hey, listen, you know, you're like telling them one thing and then you're coming and telling me something else, that's not good for you. So in order for me to help you to be loyal, go talk to that person. Address it correctly. If they show loyalty to you, then they're going to show loyalty to them. But if they're gossiping about them, then trust me, they're gossiping about you. I don't care who you think you are or how important you think you are. You're not that important to somebody that gossips. You're just not. You're just not. You're fooling yourself. Respectfulness. Treat yourself and others with courtesy, kindness, and all those good things. Responsibility. You accept personal, relational, career, community, and social obligations even when they are difficult or uncomfortable. You follow through on commitments and proactively create or accept accountability for your behavior and choices. By the way, like I said before, these are things we all need to work on. I know not all of us have all these. I know none of us actually probably have all of them figured out, but that's okay. We can work on them. Humility, you have confidence, yet modesty. And you have a modest opinion of yourself or how important you are. Well, I know that he is talking about her, but no way he could be talking about me. No way, because I am Hector Castillo, see? Okay? Everybody loves me. And then everybody's over there saying, man, that guy's a jerk, I don't like him. And I'm like, people love me, all right? So have a modest opinion of yourself and don't be prideful. One of the biggest things we need to have is compassion. See, when you have compassion for people, you help direct them, you help guide them, you help them develop a good character. It's not just treating people right, but it's also guiding them in the right direction so that they can have a good attitude towards themselves. Being fair, using discernment, compassion, and integrity, you strive to make decisions and take actions based on what you consider the ultimate best course or outcome for all involved. Forgiveness is a big one. Okay, a lot of us have trouble with forgiveness. It's one of the problems in our society, and it's plaguing us, the assemblies, in a major, major way. When we don't forgive others, Yahweh says he will not forgive us. But we don't think about that, and we don't put that into perspective because we just assume, well, of course he's going to forgive me. I am Hector. And even though I don't have to forgive you, he sees me different. See, there's a clause in what he means and what he actually says. He won't forgive you, but he'll forgive me. He doesn't. It's clear. We have to move forward. Authenticity. Be authentic. When you're fake, people know it. Trust me, I know from experience. I've been fake many times, and people know that. I can't talk about you. I can only talk about me, right? Courageous. In spite of the fear of danger, discomfort, or pain, you have the mental fortitude to carry on with a commitment or plan or decision. Let's see, go back one. Generosity, perseverance, politeness is another one, success. Kindness, lovingness, optimism, reliability. Again, I will give you guys a list of this if you want to. We can just print it out, that's not a problem. Conscientiousness, and of course, self-discipline. Self-discipline, you are able through good habits or willpower to overcome your desires or feelings in order to follow the best course of action or to rise on your commitments or principles. You have a strong sense of self-control in order to reach a desired goal. In other words, yeah, man, it's hard, going to school, but man, I got to get my degree, and I actually want to do something with my life if that's what you want to do. And while you're there, you're not losing your integrity. You're not getting involved in alcohol, drugs, and all those things that a lot of young people get involved in because you have integrity, and you have direction, and you have guidance. And you're not being pulled into the crowd, the popular crowd. Oh, I want to be one of the popular, want to be liked. Listen, you're going to lose already. That's a lose-lose attitude. If you go to college or if you're in a group or you're in school, wherever, and you're doing what the majority is doing, and if it's not good for you or for them, you're already losing. You're not winning. And all you're going to end up with is regret and loss. Okay, so now I have a story. We're going to finish here with a story. I'm going to make it quick. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cut to the highlights. Now, this is a story about the emperor's new clothes. And while I'm reading this story, I want you to think about the character and the qualities of the personalities of the people involved, okay? And I want you to sort of look at this list right here somewhere. Oops, I turned it off. It doesn't work when you turn it off. Okay, hopefully you guys can read some of them, or all of them, hopefully. Now, those are some of what would be called negative characteristics or negative qualities. And what I want you to do is, as I read the story, I want you to look at the list up there and pick out what negative qualities you think are being mentioned in the story, all right? And let's just see what you come up with, how many you have, or which ones you can identify. This is called The Emperor's New Clothes. Many of you are probably familiar with this story. It's not nothing new. It's actually a great little story. It shows a lot about ethics and characteristics and personalities. And it was written by Hans Christian Andersen. I believe he's Danish. I don't remember. And then it was translated into English. But this is the story. Many years ago, there was an emperor so exceedingly fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on being well dressed. He cared nothing about reviewing his soldiers, going to the theater, or going for a ride in his carriage, except to show off his new clothes. Now again, as I'm reading, look up there and see what lists, see what negative personality traits we're hitting on. He had a code for every hour of the day, and instead of saying, as one might about any other ruler, the kings in council, here in this town they always said, the emperor's in his dressing room. In the great city where he lived, life was always happy. Every day many strangers came to town, and among them one day came 2 swindlers. They let it be known that they were weavers that they make clothes. And they said they could weave the most magnificent fabrics imaginable. Not only were their colors and patterns uncommonly fine, but clothes made of his cloth had a wonderful way of becoming invisible to anyone who was unfit for his office or who was unusually stupid. In other words, they said, we make our clothes is so fine that only the dumb people can't see it. All right? And so the emperor said, those are the clothes for me. If I wore them, I would be able to discover which men in my empire were stupid or unfit. And then I could tell the wise men from the fools. Yes, I certainly must get some of the stuff woven for me right away. So he paid the 2 swindlers a large sum of money to start their work at once, at making these clothes. So they set up 2 looms and pretended to weave, though there was nothing in the looms. All the finest silk and the purest old thread which they demanded went into their traveling bags. While they worked the empty looms far into the night, while they stole the money, while they pretended to work far into the night. I'd like to know how those weavers are getting on with the cloth, the emperor thought. But he felt slightly uncomfortable when he remembered that those who were unfit for their position would not be able to see the fabric. It couldn't have been that he doubted himself, yet he thought he'd rather send someone else to see how things were going. The whole town knew about the cloth's peculiar power, and all were impatient to find out who their stupid neighbors were if they could not see the cloth. I know what I'll do, he said. I'll send my honest old minister, Hector, to see the weavers. It just happens that's what the emperor decided. He'll be the best one to tell me how the material looks, for he's a sensible man, and no one does this a better duty than he. So the honest old minister, Hector, went to the room where the 2 swindlers sat working away at their empty looms. Heaven help me, he thought, as his eyes flew wide open. I can't see anything at all. But he did not say so. Both the swindlers begged him to be so kind as to come near to approve the excellent pattern, the beautiful colors. They pointed to the empty looms, and the poor old minister stared as hard as he dared. He just couldn't see anything because there was nothing to see. Heaven have mercy, he thought. Can it be that I'm a fool? I never thought I was stupid. But no one must know that I'm unable to be a minister or to see the clothes. It will never do to let on that I can't see it. Don't hesitate to tell us what you think of it, said one of the weavers. Oh, it's beautiful. It's enchanting. The old minister peered through his spectacles, kind of like this. Such a pattern. What colors? I'll be sure to tell the emperor how delighted and how beautiful it is. And do you guys see the character, the personality? Right? We're pleased to hear that, the swindler said. They proceeded to name all the colors and to explain the intricate pattern. The old minister paid the closest attention so that he could tell all the emperor everything, and so he did. He never let on that he couldn't see anything. So the swindlers, of course, after the report went out that it was magnificent clothing, asked for more money, which they deserved, which they received. So other people came to see the beautiful looming, the clothing, and nobody would admit that they couldn't see anything. Because if they admitted to it, then they would be told, people would know that they are stupid. One day, the emperor, after his clothes was finished, he decided to wear his beautiful clothing out in front of the people. Well, as you can imagine, he wasn't wearing anything. But everybody knew that if they could not see the clothing, they would be considered stupid. So everybody acted as if they could see it because they couldn't be counted among the foolish. And as he was walking amongst this group of people and everybody's chanting, "Oh, we just love the emperor's new clothes," they would not admit they couldn't see anything. A little kid about the age of Tabitha's son looked and he wondered, what are people talking about? The emperor isn't wearing any clothes. And so he says, "Your Majesty, you're not wearing any clothes." And the minister or the emperor stopped for a minute and looked at the kid. And he said, "What did that kid say?" And somebody said, "Oh, he's just a kid. He can't see anything." And so the emperor continued on thinking that he was wearing the finest clothes, not knowing that he didn't have any clothes on. He did not listen to the advice of the child. All right, so what can you guys tell me in terms of characteristics and attitudes? What were some of the ones? Just yell them out. Maybe over here first. What were some of the ones? Okay, somebody said materialistic over here. Self-indulging. What else? What is it? Pretentious. Yep, over here. Superficial, impulsive. What else? Conceited. What about the people that, what about over here? Manipulative. What else? What about the people that would not be honest? Have you ever found yourself in a group of people being dishonest because being honest wasn't what everybody was doing? Have you ever found yourself like that? You know, like everybody's praising the person and you're thinking to yourself, that's hideous. And they ask you, what do you think? You're like, oh, it's just beautiful. I wish I could wear it. Even I would wear that. Now, that's just an example. What else? What other kinds of qualities are out there? Hypocrisy. What else? Plain lying. What about when the child said, "You're naked"? Distrusting. What else? What about his point of view? In other words, the emperor, when you don't have a true perspective of who you are, and you don't have an honest view of yourself, you could be like the emperor that believes one thing, but in reality, nobody else thinks that way, right? And so we have to be careful that we have what's called a mature, realistic view of who we are in our world. Now, I recently went to a training, and as I'm sitting in this training, which is a training that I often do, I sat around a bunch of young people. And I'm not putting the young people down. I'm just telling you that this is something that I learned. And as I'm listening to the young people talk, I realized that they did not have the experience that I had, but I also realized they don't want to hear my experience, right? They don't want to hear it. Because in their mind, they're the ones that have it, they're the ones that have the knowledge, and they don't need me to tell them anything. And so what it made me realize is that you guys heard of the Peter effect in regards to business? The Peter principle? It's basically, let me see if I can paraphrase it for you guys, make it simple. It's recognizing that you will only go up to a certain level in life and accepting it. It generally has to do with business. It's called the Peter principle. And in other words, you will only go up as high as you will up to a certain point, right? And then after that, you have to recognize that you've gone as far as you can go and you're done. In other words, not everybody's going to be the president of the United States, right? We could be a supervisor, but that's about as far as I'm going to go. And what I realized at that point is I've done, in terms of that kind of training, I've gone as far as I can go. And I realized in my mind that there comes a time in which you have to sort of tell yourself, I will no longer be a part of this training because I've gone as far as I can go because they are looking for something different or they need to go through their experience. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't do other things. It just means that I've realized that with the people I've gone as far, I've influenced as much, and I will not be able to do it anymore. But what I feel like is that I built a realistic point of view of myself as opposed to the other guy that was there, and I'm not picking on him, it's just a fact, that he still believed that he could make an impact, and I was thinking, you and I are no longer the impactors. They now have other people that they're looking to. So what we need to do is we need to step out of the sight and support those people over there from a distant but encouraging way. Instead of being hands-on, we need to be in the background. In other words, the Peter principle for me was met, where I realized I've done all I can do. I can do no more. That's having a realistic, factual, and honest view of my global experience in that environment. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't influence in other ways, but it means there comes a point in time in which your point of view has to be realistic. No, the world does not evolve around you. Contrary to what you may think, it just doesn't. Young people get a break. Young people get a break, and there's a bunch of young people here, so I'm going to say this to young people. You guys get a break up to a point in terms of maturity. In other words, we as adults, and I'm giving you sort of the point of view of what would be the Peter principle, we as adults look at you and say, you can get away with certain behaviors up to a point. But there's a point in time in which we will no longer tolerate your behavior. We won't. We'll look at you and say, you know what? By this time, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, and you should be doing that. I will no longer accept that. And guess what? You're going to be doing the same thing as you get older. You're going to look at your children and you're going to say, at this stage, you should be here, and you should be here, and you should be here. And if you're not trying, that's when you begin to move. Now, if you're trying and trying and trying, it's going to happen. But sometimes young people today in America are afraid to grow up. They're afraid of the word adult. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And that's a challenge that you young people have to look at and say, at what point have I met the Peter principle for me to be a young person. And now I have to go to the next level, which is to be an adult. At what point am I that? At what point are people going to, accept the silliness and then eventually say no more? And it's better if you do it yourself than if other people do it. Because if other people do it for you, it's not going to be a happy experience. It's not going to be an experience you're going to like. But if you do it, if you take control and you say, okay, I'm at this stage in my life, I'm moving up, I'm being responsible, I'm not following the crowd, I'm not drinking, I'm not making decisions that separate me or that affect my relationship with my parents or, whatever decisions you're making. When you take control of it and you look at and you realize that you've met the standard as a teenager and now you have to go to the next level. As a husband, you get married, you have to be a husband. You can't be a single guy being married. But sometimes we feel like I can live a single life and yet be married, but we can't. At some point in life, you got to stop hanging out with your friends and start staying home and being a leader. In the faith, there's a point in which you can be do what you want to do, but then you've met the standard of being outside the faith, and now you've come into the faith, and now you're responsible. You've met the Peter principle. The Peter principle applies to everything, every aspect of life. There's going to be a coming time when Dwayne and I and Robert are going to look at each other and say, I've done all that I can do as a minister. It's time for me to step down, and it's time for somebody else to take over. And when you do that willingly and you do that on your own, it makes you successful and it makes you feel fulfilled versus somebody coming and saying, man, you've been here way too long, Hector. I think it's time for you to go. You're making negative decisions. You're kind of crazy. Now you're power monger, all this stuff, right? It's always better when you yourself recognize your Peter principle in whatever stage you're at, and you yourself decide to be responsible. You yourself decide to stop acting like a teenager and start acting as an adult. And so when they say we're going to have a women's Bible study and you're no longer a kid, you're no longer a teenager, you yourself rise up and say, I am a woman and I'm going to participate. Or a man. And when they say we're going to have a man's meeting, then you don't look and say, well, I'm 25, but I don't feel like I'm a man. See? There's a problem there. There's a problem there, and you're going to have problems in your experience. And nobody should have to come tell you. You have to sort of recognize that you've met your standard, and it's time for you to take responsibility and go to the next level. So when they call out the men to war, you don't cower away because you don't feel you're a man. You rise up and you say, here I am, Yahweh, put me into service because I am now a man. And you feel more fulfilled. That's what we have to do, and that's what part of the characteristic training is all about. It's about helping you. It's not about criticizing anyone. It's about helping you recognize when you've met your Peter principle and that it's time to act like an adult versus acting like a child. It's time to recognize that I'm no longer affecting people in that sort of training and that I've done what I've done. It's time for me to step away from that and let somebody else take over. Maybe they can do a better job. Maybe they can't. But I'm no longer the center of the universe. And I can look at that and say, I've done enough. I did everything I could do. I tried. Now it's time for me to go and go to the next level and see what else I can do. All right? We're done. Thank you, guys. God bless you. And again, when we have our next session, please plan on coming and participating. See how fun this session was, right? All right, let's say a prayer and then we will be dismissed. And let's go outside and enjoy the weather. It's perfect out there. Let's pray. Dear Father, we love you and praise you, Father. We thank you because you are teaching us your way. You're preparing us for life. And we ask you, Father, that you bless us. Bless all the young people that are here. Help them, Father, as they transfer over from, evolve from childlike to an adult, making adult decisions to be responsible, loyal to you. And with guidance and direction, we ask the older people, those of us, Father, that are senior citizens, to continue to be a good example for them and to be good husbands, good fathers, and just to be good pastors and ministers and leaders in everything we do, Father. We also ask the same of the ladies, that they be an example for you and that this be a place that can make a difference in the world, that people will be talking about our little group that made a difference in the lives of many. And we thank you. And we love you and we praise you and we bless. We thank you for your blessing. We ask that you bless all those here, those that are watching us on the broadcast. Father, and we thank you again for your Sabbath. And we just praise you in Yeshua's name. Hallelujah. All right, we're dismissed.